Well, hello, everybody.
Hello, hello.
We have a What the Muppet first. We have a very special guest who we're going to do an interview style episode with. Welcome, Tim
Tim
Barnes.
Barnes. Hey, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
Hmm.
It's been a
Yeah,
long time trying to schedule this, and so I really appreciate the effort you've made. I think we've been working on this since well before Christmas, right?
yeah, I
Mhm.
think so, actually. Now that you say that, it has been before Christmas. We've been really looking forward to this. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Well,
Thanks for
I
working with
have
us
too. I've
too,
been
Tim.
watching your shows and I've been enjoying what I've seen. So thanks for
Oh,
having
Thank
me.
you.
I'm really,
thank you,
really
Tim.
pleased to be here.
Thank you. That's
Oh,
so sweet.
and whether we realized it or not, we've enjoyed your work as well. We've
Yeah.
taken in a lot of
Very
yours.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have
Considering I have so much online to see, right? Which is
been.
like almost nothing.
Yeah, you have had quite the Muppet experience, Muppet and puppet experience with working on the movie and having your own show and with marionette style and Little Shop of Horrors. That's
Yeah.
been incredible.
I've been I've been very lucky. I came up at a good time when puppets were still around, and even though I kind of came into it at the very tail end, I was able to experience a few things before it all went CG. So that was nice.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about that, Tim. And one of the
Mhm.
things that we like to, or certainly as an interviewer, I like to do, is finding a person's life, their arc, their career, their creative life. But we have to start at the beginning. So can we get your origin story, Tim? Where are you
Oh, you
from?
want the boring stuff
I
first?
do.
Okay,
I
let's
love
get
the
that out
boring
of
stuff. Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
the way. Super condensed version. I was born and raised right here in Southern California. My mother was a homemaker, and my dad was a non union, unskilled, blue collar shop worker when he decided to work, which wasn't very much, and professional drinker when he was not. My mother took care of us kids. There were three of us. I was the middle kid, and so I was the shy, slightly ignored one. I was the one that stayed
Oh,
out of trouble, so she could. We had a great relationship growing up.
oh,
Um, she actually was an artist in the true sense. She had the gift, but she unfortunately wasn't able to pursue it and really develop it the way she wanted to. She always said she wanted to. They grew up in the Midwest in Cicero, Illinois, and
Hey.
so when I wasn't hearing stories about living up the street from Al Capone and having a few interesting run-ins with his associates,
oh, wow.
she would often talk about wanting to go to the Chicago Art Institute, and as she said, draw pictures for the newspapers. This, of
Oh,
course, was decades before digital photography became
Mhm.
affordable for everyone, and you had to be what she wanted to be was a commercial artist, and she was good enough to do it, but she opted for the marriage and babies thing and kind of gave up her dream. But she always kind of kept it going. So we did a lot of crafting, and I would catch her doing little things, just drawing on the edges of the newspaper and the borders of the newspaper. Or when I would start to make something, she'd come in and help me and turn me on to a lot of things and help me in school with projects. And she taught me how to sew. She taught me how to iron. She taught me how
oh,
to handle a paintbrush and things like that. The nice thing about it was that she didn't push me. I showed an interest, showed an aptitude, and she was very supportive and very encouraging. But if I had lost interest and moved on to something else, she would have done that too. I think she would have been a little disappointed, but she would have accepted that. So
oh,
um, that was where the basic ability came from. And the fact that that was not discouraged, not pushed, but not discouraged, uh, kind of as I got into that 12, 13 years old, I was thinking, well, what am I going to do when I grow up? What am I going to do for a living? And I knew I wanted to do something in the creative arts field somewhere. What that meant, I had no idea, and or how I was going to get there. I didn't have an uncle that owned a radio station where I could go and learn to write ad copy or something like that. Um, so it was a lot of fits and starts, a lot of experimenting, a lot of trying, a lot of realizing what I was not good at or what I didn't want to do, and gradually the puppets came along as Jim and his success showed what you could do with it, and
Mhm.
that sort of fit me a little bit better than certainly being an actor. I actually started as a ventriloquist because Paul Winchell was Jim Henson before there was Jim Henson. He was my first idol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just only knew ventriloquism. I also did magic as a hobby, but I didn't want to get involved with that because I didn't like being on stage as much. So when the puppets came along, it allowed me to perform, but not have to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I more or less fell into that. I'm certain if my mother had been an actress, I probably would have been an actor. I mean, I like how Jim Henson said, no one thinks about being a puppeteer. You just kind of fall into it. And I think that's true of most careers, most professions. You go back to your high school reunion, 40th anniversary reunion, you see somebody who was the star of the football team, and all of a sudden they're, working back east as the, vice president for procurement for overseas buying and selling of toenail clippers or something. And you go, how did that happen? Well, they needed a job. And, we don't choose our careers choose us. And I was lucky that was my main interest, but I always kept a day job to pay the bills too, because that was also instilled on me.
Oh, that's something that
best advice my mother ever gave me was, you want to do this, fine, but get into something good, meaning do it terrific, but get a paycheck. And that was some of the best advice she could give me. So that's more or less
That's awesome.
launched the direction. And then it was just a matter of figuring out how am I going to do this. So
yeah, that was so heartwarming. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for that. We have some Illinois ties over here too. I'm from that area. I'm an Illinois brat, and all of our family is from there too. So that's a nice connection. And finding something at a young age, whether it was puppeteering specifically or not, understanding from a young age that you want to be a part of something, whatever that something is. The support we get from that so often it's so much bigger than we could ever realize. And to hear you talking about it, I could hear it in your voice. I could hear how much her taking that time, whether she was sitting down and saying, I'm supporting my son. It wasn't so much that as it was she was actually doing it. And that's so cool to hear, to know the end of the story, but to hear the beginning of it and hear that led to this. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I was lucky in the fact that she was a homemaker, so she was home all the time. And she was not a big believer in kindergarten and preschool and all that stuff. I jumped right into first grade, and she had to talk me into the school saying that I was going to be good enough because they didn't want to take me. And it was fine. I mean, how difficult is first grade? It's kind of hard to mess that up. But she kept me home as much as she wanted to. She didn't have to worry about me and have the hassle. She never drove. She never drove a car. So she would have to take time and walk us to school or otherwise make arrangements. It was just too much of a hassle. And so she, in that way, kind of homeschooled me. We read a lot. She was a big reader, and she made sure that we read. She didn't sit down and teach us letters and numbers, but there was always that encouragement to read or to do something, even if it was a comic book, and it was a good quality comic book, non-violent. I literally learned to read from Carl Barks, Donald Duck comic books, the good ones. I didn't know Avengers or Marvel. That Batman and Superman were great TV shows to me. That was it. I'm nerdy, but I'm not that nerdy. So I'm, whereas I didn't read the classics of Mark Twain or whoever growing up. At least if you're going to read comic books, read the quality stuff, read nonviolent, read imagination, read something that was creative. Later on, it was Mad Magazine. My mom let us read that because she thought it was funny. She had a great sense of humor in that way. So that was sort of encouraged. There was sort of a sense of homeschool. Even no matter how busy she was, she would sit down and color for a few minutes or read to us. And too many parents can't or don't do that. I also had a really good support network with teachers. Teachers were very encouraging to me and let me do my ventriloquist act or magic act or whatever in class. A lot of the stuff I would just go to them and say, can I do this? And they would say, yeah, come on in, do it. So I was very lucky. Too many kids don't have that. It would have been nice to have that for my father too, but he had his own agenda. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I really like that you learned through books a lot
Mhm.
and that your mother was a reader because there really is so much we can absorb from books and what books we read as children, how that embeds in us as
Mhm.
we grow up. That's really cool.
She could just absorb books. I could bring big, thick biographies home from the library, and she'd read them in a day and a half, to the point of picking out typos in the manuscript.
Oh,
So
wow.
she didn't just gloss over them; she would just devour them. And it's sad when you see kids 20, 25 saying, "I don't like to read," or
Yeah.
they don't even know how to read. They stumble over the words and things.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's like you're just shortchanging yourself. I
Mhm.
love computers. I love technology in that sense, but there's nothing better than sitting with an actual
Yeah.
tactile, tangible
I
book.
agree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Having it in your
sitting with
hands.
a Kindle, or with Kindle. It's too much like homework. It's too much like
Mhm.
ongoing research now, which is
Yeah.
fine. It's great, but that's work and this is pleasure. So
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more as a fellow bookworm myself.
Yeah. And our moms, Tim, sound so much alike. My mom and
Oh, yeah.
yours sound so similar. There's so many interesting things that are very similar, very much the same.
well, maybe we're related. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe we'll find out. Nowadays, you find out pretty quick. They've got a lot of different sources, 23andMe and all that. We'll find out.
Right. Piggybacking off of talking about your childhood, can you remember one of your first encounters with puppets and if that inspired you in some way?
Oh, I'm sure it must have. My mom always tried to do things on the weekends with us kids, even if we couldn't really necessarily afford,
Mm.
Disneyland or something. We would go as often as we could. Um, I have an older sister, had an older sister, and she was 7 years older than me. So she got to go to Disneyland the first year it opened. I got to
Oh,
go as a
wow.
baby in '59, so that was my first visit.
Hmm.
And I know for a fact there were puppet shows in the park, and I have
Oh,
vague memories of parades and things like that. So all of that, was almost prenatal. We would go to see little mall shows, and of course we had
aw.
television in the house all the time. So I'm sure that even though I can't recall seeing something at a year or two, I'm sure that must have gotten in there.
Oh,
The
yeah.
shows I remember seeing was when I was maybe closer to 4 or 5 years old. One of the earliest shows I remember was a guy named Tony Kemeny. He used to do a live little hand puppet show at Knott's Berry Farm, Tony's Puppets.
Hmm.
And if you want to do some research on him, he has an incredible backstory.
Oh,
He
wow.
was kind of lucky to be alive, and Walter Knott liked what he did. He liked very simple things. He wasn't about roller coasters and theme parks. He liked little art. He appreciated that, and he gave
Mhm.
Tony a place to work. And I can still recall seeing his very simple hand puppet shows worked out of a wagon, basically a
Hmm.
circus themed wagon. Um, and my mother loved the show so much that she took me into, I'm sure it was Virginia's Gift Shop, which is a store right outside of Knott's, and bought me my first commercial hand puppet, which was
Mhm.
identical to the ones he was using.
Aw.
Oh,
So
cool.
that was pretty much the first show I recall seeing, but I know for a fact there were others long before that,
Hmm.
you know,
Oh,
probably
I
are in the
love that.
recesses of my brain somewhere. But
Right. I love that. I kind of related to you in the way you said that it could have been subconscious because I didn't realize that
mhm.
my mom used to put on Muppet Babies when I was a baby. I had no idea. And I was like, oh, so it was just meant to be
Yeah.
this entire time.
Yeah,
So that was really cool to
absolutely.
relate with that. Yeah. So you had a hand puppet back then. Do you
Mhm.
prefer hand puppet, marionette, or the hand and rod? Or are they just all unique in themselves?
Well, you know, it's all art. It's all a different skill sets.
Yeah.
Um, the hand puppetry came the easiest to me because that's how I started. But
Mm.
almost early on, I had commercial uh, marionettes. As I say, I started as a ventriloquist, and did magic. So it was kind of all there, and the skill sets that you learn from that can kind of bleed over. And I think by doing magic and setting how you hold a prop or how you do a pass and realizing, okay, I'm never going to be a sleight of hand artist. I just didn't have the skill sets. My hands are very small. My fingers are kind of weak. And I just didn't have the needed dexterity for it. But I learned how to do a pass or how to do the finger exercises where those kinds of things. And that helped with manipulation because people will say to me, gee, you're really delicate, or how do you get that curl of the mouth or something? And it just goes back to that.
Oh, cool.
Vent taught me how to set up and tell a joke, set up and punchline. I did, as I said, I didn't want to be on stage, but that was the structure of that. And vent puppets are rod puppets. Marionettes were a different skill. You're limited in one way, so you can do other things with a marionette that you can't do with a hand puppet. And so it's all good. And as Jim Henson used to say, it can all mix around. So it's a matter of trying to learn, and if you can, apply one to the other. It was nice when I first started Bob Baker's. I worked with everything. I was doing shadow puppets there and things that I never would have done on my own or just didn't have the opportunity up until that point. So it's all good. I'm most comfortable with the hand puppets since they're easy and I didn't have to think about doing it.
Yeah.
But if somebody offers me the chance to do something, yeah, I don't sit there and say, I can't do marionettes or I don't do rod puppets. I may not be as skilled at it, but I'm not intimidated by it either.
That's really cool. I really like what you said, that it's all good.
Yeah.
That was a really beautiful little line.
Well, it is. I oftentimes relate a story about Lucille Ball when she was coming up in Hollywood, and how she started as, she just was so desperate to help her family financially. She came to Hollywood and she started as a model, and she did topless modeling, and she did a lot of things that people wouldn't associate with her. But she, worked as a showgirl behind Eddie Cantor. She took Seltzer from the Three Stooges. She did a cat fight on film with Maureen O'Hara. And then she eventually became Lucille Ball. And people said, did you mind doing all of that stuff? That must have been pretty degrading or pretty embarrassing. And she said she didn't mind it at all, as long as she learned something from it. Even if it was what not to do, or what you're not good at, or how to do something. And so it was all value to her. She'd never continued on. She found her niche and she did that. But as long as she learned something, and then of course the punchline was, what did you learn from working with the Three Stooges? She said, I learned how to duck.
It's just so funny.
So
good.
Again, you can sit there, it's a waste of time, or you can try to find value in it. And I've had a lot of, quote unquote, failed projects. But if you understand why they failed, you can sort of red flag it beforehand and say, this is going to be trouble. Or, I can already anticipate a problem. Let's get around that before we go any further. So again, it is all good. I don't find any negative about it.
I've always loved the quote, I never lose, I either win or I learn. That everything in life is data, and you're taking from that and growing from it and everything. Like you, I've realized from a young age kind of what I wanted to do, or at least somewhere in the ballpark of what I wanted to do, and didn't have a lot of opportunities to learn what it is to be an actor, how to be an actor or entertainer or anything. So I'd learn everywhere I could, from commercials, movies, TV shows, and interviews. One of the biggest ones for me was watching with my Nana and Papa the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson's interviewing Larry Hagman, JR from Dynasty and everything. Dallas. Dallas. Yeah, Dallas. And Johnny's talking about him, and he's like, for those that don't know, Larry's got this huge thespian career. He's done all these big roles. He's a very, very good, well-rounded actor, but everybody knows him as JR. And he's like, how do you feel about that? And he looks at him and he's like, Johnny, they can put JR on my tombstone. I don't care. I get paid to do what I love to do for a living. The idea of that really stuck with me. Getting to do this for a living, not everybody gets to, and there's so many people that want to. To appreciate that and to always remember that, I think is a really cool thing to see, especially with somebody that has such an illustrious and wonderful career like yours does.
Yeah.
One of another hero of mine is Boris Karloff. I think he was,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
obviously, the horror stuff, but I mean, he was just an incredible actor.
Mhm.
Um, and he could do comedy, he could do Shakespeare, he could do all this stuff, but he had to do the monster stuff.
Yeah.
And people later on in his career asked him, "Are you sorry you were typed as the monster, knowing that's not you at all, and it's not you as an actor?" And he said, "No, a typed actor is a lucky actor because it
Yeah.
means you've achieved something that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And every actor wants to be remembered."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you can let it eat you up alive, or you can sort of get behind it and celebrate it and say, "This is
Yeah.
the way it is. I'm lucky. I still can do the other stuff on the side
Mhm.
and would prefer it. But people want this. Hey, I'll do a television commercial, or I'll do a comedy variety show, and I'll do a radio show, and I'll do all the obvious lines about graveyards and bodies and all that. That's what they want. Fine, I'll do it. I'll take the money, and have fun doing it." So it depends on how you feel in the morning when you get up. I've
Yeah.
always tried to be a problem solver. I'm not Pollyanna, but I try to, if there's a problem, fix it, get around it.
I
Mhm.
feel that,
You
Tim.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Tim, we want to you've touched on a little bit of your early career, your early breaks, some of the early experiences you had, and we want to talk a little bit about the Muppet movie and your time on there. I've been fortunate. I haven't been interviewing that long, but I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I've gotten to do a lot of these. This is probably the most childish question I've ever asked anybody, but I can't help myself. I have to ask. When you were
it's
on the
okay. You'll get a
set,
childish answer. That's all right.
perfect, perfect.
Tim.
When you're on that set, when you're working with those individuals, those people, so many different names and so much going on, was there a feeling of like a magical feeling on the set? Was there a
Oh,
magical kind of feeling or vibe to it? And maybe I'm giving the wrong verb for it or something,
that's a
but
good one.
No,
was
not at
there
all.
an energy to it?
I was 18 when I was there, so I hadn't been on a lot of real movie sets. I grew
Hmm.
up in an area called Thousand Oaks, where there was always a great deal, and still is to a certain extent, a great deal of filming growing up. And it was not uncommon to drive down the street and see them shooting something somewhere. It might have just been a television commercial, but oftentimes there were celebrities. So I'd been on sets, but nothing like this. Um,
Hmm.
I've been working on and off with a manuscript for a life, career, whatever you want to call it. Will never see the light of day, but it's cathartic to write it.
Hmm.
And that's the hardest part, is to say, how did that feel to be there? They
Mhm.
will ask you, what was it like, or what happened? That's the easy part. How did it feel? And it's, I can still recall the feeling. It's hard to put into words. It was fun and exciting. It was interesting and educational.
Hmm.
And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized this is a once in a lifetime experience.
Cool.
So shut
Hmm.
up and listen and learn.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just try to be a sponge and absorb it. It
Mhm.
it was at times a little surreal,
Mm.
because I'm very much into old Hollywood history, and to find that it was shot on a lot that went back to the days of Max Sennett
Mhm.
and Republic Pictures, and so many major stars started there.
Mhm.
And now I was there,
Yeah.
and at the same time seeing something that was very contemporary, brand new. I could go home and watch the Muppets, or I could walk on the set and I could see them live and see the
Yeah.
people working them live. So it was a lot to take in. Um,
Yeah.
and I was just there for a couple of days, just observing. And
Mhm.
Jim almost immediately put me to work. Here, do this kind of thing. And okay, you know,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
if you want, and I kind of felt I was sort of half a step behind. Like, I
Mhm.
can't believe what I'm doing here. This is
Yeah.
like not supposed to happen. And I've had that experience 3 or 4 times when I was brought in to do different projects that I really wasn't prepared to do.
Mhm.
But you better get it together, because people are, spending money on this.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
uh, that's about the only way I can describe it. Just the
Oh,
fact that
that's
it
great.
was it
Yeah.
was fun and interesting, and serious work. And I learned a lot about filmmaking. People say, "What'd you learn?" I learned a lot. I never thought about how films were actually made. I was a television guy. I was a theater guy.
Mhm.
Uh, just learning how a scene was shot in a master, and then close-ups, and then everything was intercut. learning how they would loop later on. And I was just learning leaps and bounds every day. Oh, that's how that's done. Oh, that's what that piece of
Wow.
equipment is for.
Mhm.
Oh, that's what that guy does on the set. And you try to just soak it up and gunny sack it, because again, you never know if you're going to need that.
Yeah. Wow. I thank you for sharing that with us. That is so cool. I can't even imagine just that overwhelming feeling in a good way of being on that set. That just sounds incredible.
Well, I don't think I breathed for about 8 hours. So
Yeah, I would not either. No, I'm so
Yeah.
with you. Yeah.
My father-in-law has a question for you that I just remembered. I would have kicked myself for not remembering. I
you need
told
a cheat sheet like I got here,
Yeah.
him. So he wants to know, is Kermit the Frog as nice in person as he is on TV?
It's a great
Kermit the
question.
Frog
These
was
are hard
very
hitting
nice to
questions.
me.
He was so good.
I didn't. I got to see Kermit actually work. I've told this story before, but everybody who ever met Jim Henson, I'm sure, feels that they have the definitive story or the best way to have met him. If you're a crew member and he's directing, or you're a lawyer and he walks into a business meeting, or you just run into him in an airport or a restaurant, that's your experience, and you think, wow, that was really cool.
Mhm.
In my case, if I had sat down and crafted, how would you want this to play out? It couldn't have been more perfect.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't just bumping into him or going into an audition or something like that. I mean, you walk on the set, there are all the Muppet characters, there are all the performers, and they're getting ready to shoot one of the screening room shots, the
Mhm.
one where Kermit actually walks into the room. So I see Kermit working and talking to the other characters before I see Jim, and then I saw Jim. So again, it was like if you wrote that, no one would believe that that happened, but that's the way it played out
Yeah.
for
Oh my
me.
gosh.
I met Kermit, quote unquote, the actual second day I worked, which was a light work day for Jim. That was the day Mel Brooks and Charles Durning were working, the first day they were
Oh, I
working.
see.
And
Jeez.
Mel Brooks is like
Oh.
comedy god to me. So
Mhm.
I
Yes.
walked in and I recognized his voice, and I didn't know he was in the movie. I go, that's Mel Brooks. And so I got to watch him work on top of it. But
Wow.
Oh.
but I did get to meet Kermit officially once he got his collar restitched, and I got to help block that scene, and we chatted a little tiny bit anyway, and I got to shake his hand.
Oh,
And yes, I know this is getting very cutesy, but
it is.
they all
I
broke for
love
lunch. They did all break for lunch, and Kermit was still tied up. He had his arms tied behind him in his open collared shirt, and they just took him and plopped him on the puppet stand and went to lunch. And I left the stage too because they were going to close up for lunch. And Kermit was there, and his head was all flopped off to one side. He looked like an old sock. And I thought, he's already been through too much. He's tied up, he's threatened here,
Yeah.
And so I went and I fixed him, and I put him.
Oh,
I just had to do that.
Tim.
I know that's really cutesy. I know that would
That's
make
awesome.
Frank
No,
Oz
that's
gag, as he
awesome.
says.
I
But
love that.
it's just something that I had to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I get that.
love that.
Mhm.
So you can tell your
That's so
father-in-law,
cool.
yes, Kermit was very, very nice to me.
He
And
will be very
he let
happy to hear
me,
that.
the last day I worked, he let me try him on. So
Really?
yes.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh. Oh,
Yes.
Tim, it is so cool to just experience this secondhand, hearing these stories. And you're such a good storyteller. I feel
Yes.
like I'm seeing it all in my
Mhm.
head.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I've been practicing.
Yeah, they're nice.
And I'm trying desperately not to ramble. I have a tendency to ramble. So cut
No,
me off
No,
if I do.
great.
no. And as a fellow rambler, please. No,
As a secondary fellow
yeah,
rambler.
you're in good company. You're in very good company.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of ramblers. So you were talking about your amazing time on the set of the Muppet movie. Did you have anything? You kind of touched on things that you took from that experience, but is there kind of a big one that you've taken from that you might have used in later experiences in your life?
Oh gosh. It was just a lot of little things.
Yeah.
Obviously it was meeting Jim
Mhm.
and a few other people on the set and watching the rest of them work. It
Yeah.
was actually doing the movie. It was being a part of a studio that became a very favorite studio of mine.
Mhm.
That we shot over at what's called Studio Center, which started as I said, Max Sennett, and then it turned into Republic, and then it got into CBS Studio Center, and they did shows like Gilligan's Island and
Oh,
Gunsmoke
wow.
and Get Smart and on and on
Is that the
and
set in
on.
Berkeley?
So, I'm sorry.
Is that the set in Berkeley?
The which set in?
I'm thinking of the studios in Berkeley that they've got some CBS
No,
studios.
the
in
studio
Berkeley.
is actually in studio. It's actually in Studio City,
Oh, okay.
and it's so funny to which is just part of LA, part of the San Fernando Valley, and not far from Universal Studios.
Okay.
And it's so funny because Gilligan's Island was supposed to be lost somewhere in the South Seas someplace, and it was kind of right off of Ventura Boulevard, which is kind of like Wilshire or Sunset or any of the big streets. And so that was fun to be around and to be there during the production, to be on certain days. I got to see a lot of the stuff being sort of finished, sets being built. I saw the giant animal head being pulled out of the shop and taken over to the Western Street. Got to stand on the Western Street that they used for the film, but also where it was used for Gunsmoke and 1,000 other westerns,
Wow.
including High Noon, and
Wow.
stood in the spot that Gary Cooper stood on. And so, it's just to pick out one thing that was great about it, let alone the Muppets. Even if they had not been there, somebody had just said, "Hey, come on in and hang out at the studio," it still would have been great.
Wow. Yeah.
I got to go back and visit, worked on another puppet film a few years ago, and most of the backlot has been torn down. Gilligan's Island, Kermit's Swamp is gone. The Western Street is gone. The New York Street is gone. But the Seinfeld Street was there. And so,
cool.
I got to hang out there for the day. It was a Saturday. There was nobody on lot. So that was fun to kind of be able to
that's
explore
always
that.
fun.
It wasn't the same, but it was fun. So in terms of any one thing, no, I couldn't tell you. It was just, again, it was all good,
Right.
But it seems like an experience like that. You're constantly learning so many things that it's almost an encompass of everything that you take in. The experience itself is just a lesson.
Yeah.
It's very much a crash course. I've been most of my, quote unquote career, if you want to call it that, has always kind of been like a football player sitting out the game for 3.5 quarters and then suddenly being brought in because they had nobody else. Here's the ball, run it, and getting it almost down to the touchdown, until somebody
You're a
actually
relief
makes it
pitcher.
go sit on the bench again. So it's been kind of feast or famine. I've been brought into stuff saying, "Can you do this?" I don't know. I never have, but I'll try. And sometimes it works, and most times, fortunately, it works, but not always.
No.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I could probably understand that it would be overwhelming to try to pick one thing. So that's great that you can still, that happened when you were 18, you said, right?
Yeah, I was 18. I was really lucky in the sense that because I started kind of deciding I wanted to do this the last year in high school, which was, long story short, just wound up being a complete waste of time. They couldn't teach me anything else. There was nothing left for them to teach me. And so they could have handed me my diploma a year early and I could have gotten out and gotten a job and helped out the family. But I had to play the game and finish out. So I was homeschooling myself in puppets and business and learning how to write a resume and learning how to write press releases and do interviews and cold calling and that kind of stuff, which helped with a day job situation, but also to do the puppets on the side. And so by the time I graduated high school and about a year after that, I got right in at Bob Baker's and then right in at Muppet Movie. And I was working in public access television, which was great education and a story in of itself. So I had all that experience by the time I was pretty much 19 years old.
Wow.
And that helped me decide this is kind of what I want to do. Now I have to do it right. This is only going to get me so far. Muppet Movie got me a lot of great press, but you're only as good as your last job. So now you got to go out and do it again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. That is so cool. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
You had another good question.
Oh, yeah. So along with puppet work, you've also done a lot of voice acting. Or you've had some voice acting experience.
A little bit. I wouldn't say a lot, but I've had the experience.
Okay. Yeah.
If a voiceover job came along, that I was right for,
Mhm.
I would do it in a heartbeat, because I love the challenge. We talked before
Yeah.
about what kind of puppets do you like, to try to work without puppets and without the crutches that actors use of their face, their voice, their hands, their bodies on
Mhm.
camera, and just channel your performance through a voice and have that
Right.
character be fully rounded and live. That's a real challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of what I've done has been really technical,
Mhm.
ADR work, narrating commercials when you're reading copy for the first time. I was training in motion capture and
Mhm.
voicing characters improv on the fly, but having to adapt to the computer system, which wasn't designed for puppeteers.
Oh, yeah.
So again, it's all challenging. Um, I would love to be able to do something like that. I'm not a voice guy at all, as you can tell. My voice is very high and pitched and nasal and effeminate, and it has no range to it. And I've no voice training,
Oh,
no timbre,
I
nothing
don't know
like
I
that.
about that,
disagree.
Tim.
Completely
Yeah.
disagree. You got a great voice. I
But
like
it would
your
be right for an elf or something, so to come in
Tim,
and say,
I
could
think
you
you got a
do
good
a,
voice.
I don't think
for
you give
local
yourself enough
radio
credit.
commercial? Yeah, you come in and, hey, Santa, let's do it for Christmas. Really
Yeah,
easy
there
stuff
you
to do.
go.
I
But
think you have a good narration voice, honestly.
Yeah.
well, I can talk, but I don't like to listen to my voice. And whenever I have to do something like this, I always say, I apologize, but you just have to listen to it for a few minutes. I have to live with the rest of my life. So
You're very funny. I honestly think you have a nice like voice. And
Yeah.
well, thank
I
you. I
do
appreciate
understand.
that.
I think we all are critics of our own voice.
Oh,
I have to
yeah.
edit our
Yeah.
podcast and hear my voice all the time.
I do radio
It's
for a
yeah.
living and I hear you. Yeah. But in my
Yeah.
headphones, I would like to actually have something else playing in my headphones so I don't have
Mhm.
to hear my voice when I'm on the air. So I don't.
Yeah, you have to focus on the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny when I watch some of the puppetry work, I kind of watch the puppets and I'm watching the manipulation, and I don't really hear myself as much. I can be a little bit more objective about it.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing this and I'll be listening to the playback and I'll be listening to the show, I just cringe when I hear this. But can't you get somebody else to say this for me? So,
I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, we just had one more question for you, and we'll wrap up
Mhm.
with letting people know what you're up to now. But before we do, you came up with a really good one, I thought, Brie, about do you have a favorite Muppet or Muppet movie?
well, I have to say Muppet movie for obvious reasons.
Mm,
As objective as I can be, I still think it's one of the maybe one or two best films they did.
mhm.
It
Agreed.
just really works as a film. I really like Muppets Take Manhattan because of Frank
Mhm.
Oz's input with that.
Yeah.
Um, I would say Great Muppet Caper. After that, the newer stuff I'm really not into. It just doesn't have
Mhm.
Mhm.
a Henson feel about it.
Yeah.
And
That
I
makes
know people really like Christmas Carol a lot. I personally can't get into it only because I'm kind of tired of the story. Everybody's done it, and
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
pretty depressing to me. But if you're going to do it, it was done well, I think.
Yeah.
No, no,
I,
well
I
said.
just,
That's well said.
if I have to see another version of Christmas Carol, it's like thanks but no thanks. I don't care how well it's done.
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
get that.
Treasure Island, I couldn't get into. The new Muppet movie, I couldn't get into. I just am really not terribly interested in the work. It's just very different now. And,
Yeah.
the puppets are beautiful. The puppetry is great. I think people are trying. And I think that if once in a while you get a little moment here and there, that's great. But
Mhm.
it's not the same. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to pick, a favorite. I go back to the original. And the truth of the matter is, when you see the top 10 Muppet movies listed, Muppet movie usually comes in at number one. It's never below number three. Um,
No.
so that has to say a lot, because you're talking about, people who weren't even alive when that came out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so
Hmm.
that says a lot. They only know Steve Whitmire or whoever doing Kermit. They don't know Jim's Kermit. They don't know the early work as well. They've seen it and they're
Yeah.
amazed by it, but they don't know it. They can't relate to it. So
Mm.
their area of reference is different. But when they go back and look at it, it's amazing that the film holds up. You could sit there and say it's
Yeah.
dated, it's 70s, there's a
Yeah.
lot of technical bloopers in it, um, but it still really does hold up as a film. I
Mhm.
think Muppets Take Manhattan is probably the prettiest film they did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
funny. It's a really
Very
good
funny.
story, and it's funny, and you can feel Frank Oz's,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
touch
Yeah.
on it, taste on it.
Mhm.
I like what you said, that I do appreciate that Muppet content is still coming out, but I do agree that it doesn't have like that Jim Henson lens to it, which for obvious reasons is very hard to replicate because it came
Oh,
from
yeah.
his mind and everything. But it's so beautiful that we can watch it back like a million times and still feel that comfort.
And I
Oh, yeah.
appreciate that. Like I'm coming from a radio background and been doing that for like
Mhm.
20, 22 years. And when I came into
Mhm.
it, they told me, well, we don't know how long radio is going to be around. And the fact that it's still around, that it still, has a
Mhm.
place. I'm not saying it's as big as, certain other mediums or anything, but that it still has a place. Even when I
Mhm.
hear like radio that I don't necessarily like or I don't think is really what radio used to be or what I love about radio, I'm happy there's still radio. I'm happy that there's
Yeah.
still
Mhm.
stuff being made. Even if I don't get it, I get that I don't get everything. But
Yeah.
it's not everything's not for me. And a lot of the people that I run into don't seem to always get that. It's got to be my way or the way I did it and everything.
Mhm.
I appreciate that yeah, maybe I don't get into it, but I'm happy it's still being made. I'm happy that, young kids
Well,
and
yeah, well,
new generation.
anything that keeps puppeteers working is a good thing,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
cool. It's cool that you get that.
I don't want to see these characters go away. I mean,
Mhm.
Jim Henson was asked, how long were these characters going to last when he was at his height, and he said, "We don't know how long they're going to last." He said, "We'll keep them out as long as the audience wants to see them, and if they don't want to see them, they'll go away."
Mm.
He was very philosophical about it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and if the work just really got lousier and lousier and sloppier, it would go away.
Hmm.
I don't think that
Yeah.
Sesame Street is what it was. I don't even watch it anymore
Hmm.
because I remember first season when it was just gut funny.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Ernie and Bert were the best comedy team
Oh,
on
yes.
television at the time.
Mhm.
Oscar was hysterical
Mhm.
because it was so kind of anti-children's television. They were getting
Grover
away
was
with stuff
underrated
that
as a
they shouldn't have
comedian.
gotten away with, and that
Yes.
you can't do now.
Yeah.
But as Frank Oz said, it's a good show, but it's a little wussy kids show now,
Mm.
and it's not funny at all.
Hmm.
I go back and I watch YouTube a lot, partly because I just like to see classic stuff, and it doesn't have to be something from the 30s or 40s, which I love.
Mhm.
It can be first 5, 10 years of Sesame, and watch Frank Oz and Jim Henson cracking each
Yeah.
other up, and the stuff they get away with. It's funny stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't do that nowadays because somebody is going to complain,
Mhm.
So much
So,
of that is timeless, the work that they did.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks said that political correctness is killing comedy.
Mm.
You can't say anything or do anything that's out of the norm. And they got away with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, comedy's
Some of that
always
stuff
been
is just, and you don't really see that in the films now. Now, if they put in kind of an adult line, it sort of stands out. It's done for shock value as opposed
Yeah.
to just off the cuff, throw it in, get a laugh kind of thing.
Mhm.
One of the lines that people loved in Treasure Island, because Frank was still doing Piggy at the time, was when she was speaking with Long John Silver, and all she said to him was, "How's it going, Long John?" And people were shocked that they got away
Yeah.
with that. Kids didn't pick up on it, but adults did, and
Yeah.
that's funny as hell.
It was, yeah.
So
Yeah.
as opposed to Fozzie walking around with fart shoes, it's
Mhm.
just different,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It hits a little different.
And comedy has always been the great equalizer. It's why they
Mhm.
had court jesters for kings and queens back in the day and everything. It was supposed to make the pauper and the king on the same level, that everybody is everything and everybody can take a joke, that we can all take a punch. And I think that's part of what the Muppet universe really is trying to do, and it really does pulls off is not only it being inclusive and everybody is welcome, but that
Mhm.
we all have differences, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's a positive. It's not that doesn't mean that it's a negative. It's actually a positive about who you are. It's a personality trait that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And
Um,
and back in the 20s and 30s, ethnic humor was a celebration of differences. Now it's used as a weapon.
yeah,
Mhm.
There was nothing wrong with doing a dialect on stage.
Mm.
But when you use it to hurt someone,
Yeah.
Knowing the
these people are
difference.
wrong,
Yeah.
these people are down. That's also the difference. But if you sit there and say, I'm going to do a dialect, or I'm going to do ethnic humor, people's backs go up. What are you doing? Why can't we just keep everything the same?
Hmm.
And it's like, that's not the point. It's very, very subjective. And we could talk for days about
Yeah.
comedy and what's funny. And like they say, you try to analyze comedy, the minute you cut into the patient, it dies. You can't explain a joke. You can't explain what's funny about it. It's either
Yeah.
funny or it's not. Comedy has all of these rules about it: timing, pacing, delivery, all this stuff. But when it comes down to it, there's no rules. It's just, is it funny?
Mhm.
If it's funny,
Yeah.
it's funny. It's a good joke.
Yeah, like you said, very subjective. Yeah.
We're gonna have to bring you back, Tim. There's like I've got like
Yeah.
5 or 6 more questions. I know she had other ones. You're gonna have to do this again with us sometime. This was too much fun.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll leave you with a tease. How about this? You were asking me what was my takeaway from the Muppet movie.
Yes.
How about some original Big Bird feathers?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Wow.
Let's see if we can get that without too much
Oh.
glare. There
I
we
see
go.
them.
They're so cool.
Oh, as a Big Bird fan, I'm just geeking out. That's so cool.
We finished shooting that night, and I said, I know there's feathers on that stage.
They
did
got
Good on
not
you
you.
take
somewhere.
away from Big
Smart,
Bird. I did
man.
not
Yeah.
pluck Big Bird. These were on the floor. They were going to pick them up anyway. I figure I'm taking them. So
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
Tim, you've been the
Well-
best. You've been such a blast. If
Yeah.
people want to see more work of yours or see what you're up to next or support you in your work anyway, how can they do that?
Well, I try to keep it really simple and really focused. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Tim Barnes Puppeteer. I don't really have a website, but I've got a lot of little profiles out there that
Okay.
don't get much traffic. I don't worry about that. I tried Threads for a while, and that was just a hassle. So I said, no, month ago, that's enough. I'm getting off of that. I keep it simple, straightforward. And I love to hear from people. I'd love to hear from people who worked on the film. I got a bunch of production skills I couldn't get from Henson. They said didn't exist, but I got it from someone who worked the film that night. And so, I'm happy to share what I have, and I'd like to, hear from other people. So anybody's welcome to, shoot an email, and I can
That's very
steer
cool.
them in the right direction, send them photos, and I certainly will be steering them to this show. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
we're gonna
Appreciate you.
get you more foot traffic. I know that.
Oh, thank you,
Back,
Tim.
yeah, thank you.
My face actually hurts from
Yeah,
smiling.
so much right in here. Yes, you're so right about yeah. We've been really, really enjoying this. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Tim.
Well, thank you for being such good hosts. Not
Aw.
everyone is, but I could tell that you really enjoy what you're doing. It comes across, and I knew this was going to be a pleasure to do. So
Thank you so much.
She
Tim.
writes all my lines, so I'm okay. I just read the cue cards.
well, we know who the smart one is in this.
Oh yeah,
one.
definitely,
Okay.
definitely,
Oh, you
absolutely, 100%.
No, thank you so much. You've been so much fun. And like you said, we'll have to have you back on. I love hearing your stories and just talking in general.
Well, anytime, give me a heads up. Maybe we'll get together in another 5 or 6 months or something.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Sounds good to us.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank everybody for listening and tuning in. And we'll catch everybody next time.
Thanks, everybody.